This is Veronica Maldonado coming to you from Cal State Long Beach, and today I have communications professor Dr. Erin Cargile with me, who specializes in intercultural communication. Dr. Cargile came in to speak to my intercultural communications class about racial injustices, and that presentation was just so eye-opening and truly life-changing. So thank you for doing that, and also thank you for being here today to speak with me about your thoughts on reverse racism.
Sure, my pleasure.
So to get started, I just want to know your own personal definition of racism.
So racism is the idea that prejudice being a judgment that you have about somebody, either in terms of a stereotype or cognition, an emotional reaction, affect, and then behavioral predispositions, what you're inclined to do. That's the prejudice part. You're prejudging somebody. You have this ready-made set of responses to somebody before you know them. They present a salient cue, in this case, race. You ascribe a given racial identity to them, and you're ready to go.
Well, I think that's pretty spot on. I'm just curious to know what you think about this trend going on of reverse racism being brought up on social media, just in normal discussions. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say it's not a trend. It has a deep history in the United States of the dominant group co-opting the rhetorical strategies of people who are oppressed. People who bear the brunt of their victimization aren't allowed to complain or aren't able to have their victimization acknowledged because the dominant group quickly comes in and says, I'm a victim too, just as much as they're victims, potato, potato, and now all of a sudden their victimhood is not acknowledged, addressed, or redressed. And so it's a very old rhetorical strategy. This all started after the Civil War. Basically, white people were looking for a way to maintain their power and privilege without the institution of slavery. And claiming to be the victim is part of that. So this idea that white people are going to say, well, I'm oppressed too, that's deep in our history, not a trend.
Right. Well, thank you for clearing that up.
Sure.
My professor and your colleague, Dr. Mark Rich. He brought up something in our lecture that really resonated with me, and he had the definition of the word oppression on the board, and he described it as being prejudice and power combined. And he also mentioned a research study by Alan Johnson, who stated that only the dominant group can be oppressive because only the dominant group has the power to do so. So when we're talking about reverse racism, in your honest opinion, is it even possible for minorities to be considered racist?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a shocking answer. Yeah, it is. It's about power. So can people of color be oppressive or can they be racist? And theoretically, yes. You can maybe point to some isolated contexts in which people of color are the predominant dominant group. Right. It is possible, yet it's rare and constrained.
So reverse racism, myth or fact?
Yeah, I would say myth. Right.
Okay.
So even though it's theoretically and technically possible, and I want to, because part of the problem is when the victim becomes the victimizer, we stay in this dance of victimization. And so there's a question like, how can people who have this history of victimization turn around and become the victimizers? It happens.
Right.
And so I think breaking that cycle is to acknowledge that this is a very real possibility. So I think as a person of color, I want to be open and sympathetic to instances where maybe myself and other people of color are becoming victimizers. And so I always want to hold that open as a possibility, and I want to listen to that. That the trick is not to let that complaint of reverse racism take up all the oxygen in the room, which it frequently does, and everybody's directing their attention to mitigating that while more clear and obvious forms of victimization are happening. So, it is technically possible and does occur occasionally, yet it's a myth in the sense that it's widespread and it's problematic. The claim of it is really important because it serves the function of mitigating the claims of people of color.
Right.
So even though we need to be open to that possibility, we need to also understand the way that it's used rhetorically to shut down the conversation and to shift the focus. And so in the same space that I acknowledge it, I'm also going to defend against it taking up all of our time and energy.
Exactly. Thank you again so much for your time and your expert opinion on the matter. You're very knowledgeable about what you do and very passionate too. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Sure, my pleasure.